actually done. She doesn't know it, but usually some of the watershed resources take some of that responsibility on. Like we're applying for more grants, like as umbrella organizations. So I think we're just gonna figure from there, and then once we get terms
I know Amanda touches women's church. I know. I would never be able to get you to the front if I didn't stop. So we're just going to pass it back and forth. Okay, we can go with that. Yeah. I like to ask the question better. That voice is loud. The main reason we wanted to run is because we were Facebook Live. Yeah, so we didn't want you to not be able to hear your voice. Exactly. So and some people that hear it. I think we're live. And we're live. So good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I was going to say on this sunny evening, it's the first evening we've had of rain, which we're all very thankful for, I think. And hopefully bringing in. If it hadn't been the rain, we could have said to people, we can come in for the air conditioning, because I think lots of places were interested in that. My name is Dawn Binns. I'm a resident of the town of Stratford and own a business called Insight Brand and Marketing Studio. And we're excited to be here to moderate and kind of lead this session this evening, although the leaders in the room are to my left here. So I'm just here to ask the questions and keep things rolling. We are using a mic. I know it's a small room, but we are on Facebook Live, so if there's anything you miss afterwards that you want to watch, you'll be able to see it there. And all those people that are at home or sitting on a deck somewhere, if it's raining, they're able to watch as well. So welcome to the Municipal Politics Q&A. This is being hosted by the town of Stratford. Stratford certainly has a strong commitment to resident engagement and making sure people are involved and having their voice heard, and certainly being a member of council and running for municipal politics is a great way to have that happen. So, you know, knowing that, wanting that to happen, the town decided to hold a session where we get to ask some of those questions of the people who have been there and done that. The good, bad, and maybe a few interesting stories, I'm sure. But it's really important because sometimes the barriers we think are there aren't really there. And the questions we have can be very simply answered, and maybe that makes us want to consider to run because it is an important part of our town and our community. So we do have two exceptional leaders with us, Mayor David Dunphy and Senator Diane Griffin, who was formerly on the Stratford Town Council, if you weren't aware. So both not only in municipal politics, but in municipal politics here in the town of Stratford. Their bios are extensive, so we're actually not going to do that. This is a very casual, informal, sit-down conversation. So we're going to start off just by asking each person to ask Senator Griffin to just tell us a little about how you got involved in municipal politics. What happened to make that happen? Maybe a little bit about why.
Okay, thank you. Well, I was serving on council in two different separate periods. One was a 3-year period in the late 1990s, and then I had another job that was getting close to a conflict of interest. So I thought, just let me up here without getting into any trouble by the end of my term. And when I retired from the other job, then I came back as a candidate and ran for council again. And the reason for it is, it's a fantastic town. It's been growing and new growth going on again. Stratford has long prided itself on being a progressive community and a diverse community, which is great. So I saw it as a real opportunity to contribute to government at the most local level. They often say it's the level where the rubber hits the road.
Literally?
If you have a sewage problem or something else, you call the mayor. Call the mayor. Actually, that's one thing I found as a counselor, they'll call the mayor.
So he might have a different perspective on this.
They have. Anyway, they tend to do that as opposed to calling their counselor.
Yeah.
Maybe I just kept a low profile, I'm not sure, for taller people than I. So,
No pun intended.
but the thing I liked about it was I really enjoyed getting to know my neighbors better, because we have a ward system here. We're not like Cornwall, which is an at-large system. They could all come from one corner of the town in Cornwall. We have it so that we've got 3 wards. It's very unusual, and that we had 2 people per ward. All I had to do was make sure I came second. I knew Steve Ogden was gonna come first. So all I had to do was come second.
You don't even have to be the first past that post.
Yeah, I just needed to be second past the post. But one thing that surprised me is that we didn't have more candidates running. The 3rd election ago, we all got in by acclamation.
Okay.
There was one ward, Ward 1, where 3 of us had nominated, and 2 people had nominated for Ward 3, and only 1 for Ward 2. So, whoa.
Yeah.
I went and got 10 more signatures from Ward 2. Pulled my application from Ward 1 at 10 to 4, and the nominations closed at 4 o'clock.
Great.
So that shouldn't happen.
No, and that's what we're here.
We should have lots of names on the ballot. Why not? Stratford is full of people who are so capable. We have probably, on average, on Prince Edward Island, the highest educated population, perhaps among the most diverse population, so there's no reason why we shouldn't have a lot of people putting their names on those ballots.
Excellent. David, do you want to tell us how you got started in things?
Sure. Well, my involvement with my community started way back. I'm just trying to think how old I was. I think I was actually 17. And I was at.
It is an hour-long session, David.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to go back that far, but I got involved in with my community morale. I actually was going to university at the time, and they knew that I was going through. I was interested in accounting, and so they actually approached me about being treasurer of Morale and Area Recreation Commission, which was a great experience for me at the time as a young person. And then later on, I got involved with the community of Bunbury, and I'll tell you, the former mayor, Stratford Kevin Jenkins is here,
Yes.
and Kevin's kind of integral to this story. Kevin and I seem to cross paths, or I'm not sure if I was following him around for the last 20 years, but basically, at the time, Kevin was the counselor for the community of Bunbury, and Kevin was the chair of finance, and Kevin was retiring from the council. So the chair at the time, John Kenny, he said, well, Dave's an accountant. Okay, so Kevin's an accountant, I'm an accountant. He needed an accountant for chair of finance, so he came and talked to me and convinced me to run. I said, sure, I'll run. And that's really where it started. And then, of course, I took a break. I had some family was young. I took a break, and then in 2003, same year, Kevin ran for mayor of the town. I ran as councillor. So from there, it just kind of expanded, and I just always had a love for my community. And there's, as Diane said, Stratford's a beautiful community, it's a growing community, it's an excellent community, and so there's so many people other than councillors. I mean, councillors, we all want to participate and contribute, but even just volunteers in the community or volunteering, whether it's sports teams or any association, and so it takes many people to make the community better, but certainly more people could be involved at the council level. So that's how I got started in council.
Thank you. And that's excellent. And I always find that fascinating that quite often we put ourselves forward, but sometimes someone asks or prods. So maybe you're in the audience and it's not necessarily something you're thinking of, maybe you know some people that you could encourage. And I think that's important too, right? I mean, obviously putting ourselves forward, but asking and encouraging others that you think would be good. Maybe they've been thinking about it, but they're not necessarily ready to put that name forward. So now that you've both done it, you've been there, you've done that, what would you say is the best part of the job as councillor or mayor and in that piece? Who'd like to take that first? Do you want to go first, David?
Sure, I'll go first.
Well, the thing, once you, hopefully somebody here, many people here, and before I say any more, I want to acknowledge our current councillors that are in the room there. We have Councillor Jolie Jackson and Councillor Ogden, of course, and former Mayor Jenkins, of course. One of the things that, when you're on council, you'll understand is that things don't move as fast as you necessarily want them to move. So,
It could be the federal government.
well, no, the federal government's still fine now.
level
No, it's sometimes, for example, like, an infrastructure project, like the sewer, for example, like we want to talk about sewer tonight, but, so basically, you know, that was discussed for years, but we didn't have the funds to do it. But then when the money arrives, and we've analyzed it and discussed it, and you have the money, then when those projects take place, even though they take a long time, when they're taking place, that's really when you feel, I think feel really good, is that you're making a contribution, making a difference. So it's when you're working on projects, and what people don't understand is all the work behind the scenes, by council, by staff, community members that make that project happen. So that's what's really the most rewarding. And then of course, people will come up to you, and they don't call that often, but they do come up to you and they do thank you and say that's a great idea, great decision. So you do get those kinds of comments. So I would say that's the most rewarding thing for me.
I think from my viewpoint, the most rewarding thing was working with the citizens of Stratford. And of course, we had some excellent consulting firms that we also worked with. But I love...
Who are also citizen residents.
Yes, there you go. But I really love working with the staff we have in our town. We've got a professional staff that are very capable and very dedicated. So I really, really enjoyed working with the staff, and I really enjoyed working with the other councillors. But I'll tell you another group that perhaps we haven't really mentioned yet. The mayor mentioned volunteers, but we have on most of our, I think all of our standing committees, with the exception of one, we have 5 citizen volunteers at large, as opposed to 2 councillors. So those committees make a lot of decisions that they recommend to council. So that's putting a lot of power into non-councillors to impact the growth and the direction of our town. And it's also a great training ground if people are on those committees to get them used to the idea of maybe running for council.
Yeah, that's excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you. One of the things then, and we did ask people for questions ahead of time, and that's a lot of what I'm turning to here. And I will say to the crowd, if there's something you want to ask, maybe just wave at me and I'll pause between questions, and I might get you to go to the mic just so our online viewers can hear you. But I will ask another one, and if you have one, please give me a little wave. So one of the things that people often wonder about is the time. How much time it takes to be a councillor, potentially be a mayor. You know, what does that look like? And we had a number of questions, and I'll kind of lump them all together. Maybe you can speak to that time commitment. The question was how much time is involved, how much is in meetings, you know, is it possible to work full time and serve in one of these positions? How do you balance, you know, we say work-life balance, it's all a blend of things, I think, but that idea of blending your say your full-time job, this commitment, and potentially other personal commitments. Yeah, so just a little bit about that and the time required.
I guess I could say it's like a lot of things. You can put as much into it as you want to, but at a minimum, there's one town council meeting a week, lasts about 2 hours, except when we're doing the budget. There's also one committee of the whole meeting, and generally that's probably about 3 hours, one a week, or one a month rather. So those are 2 meetings a month. But all councillors generally serve on 2 committees, vice chair of one and chair of another. So those committees meet usually once a month. So that would be the minimum. But I found when I was on council, I like to have my nose in more things and would go to more meetings and get out to official openings or other things because I like meeting people.
Yeah, I've never really added up how many hours I do spend here a week, and that's probably a good thing. And whether you can work full-time, I think you can work full-time. I've often said, and I shouldn't even repeat that here, but I've said it's a great job if you're retired. You know, it's a great job as mayor if you're retired because you have more time. But I think it's important. You can work a day job, which I do, and be a councillor or be a mayor, I think. And Diane said it perfectly. She says you can put as much or as little as you want into it, and I found that the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. So in terms of time, someone like Diane Griffin is a good example. So Diane's an individual that has many talents. Diane has a long background in government, and she's got a very good background in biology and the environment and those kinds of things. So someone like Diane, for me as mayor, I was able to utilize someone like Diane in areas that the town needed that expertise or that guidance, leadership. And so, unfortunately for Diane, I guess she got maybe pulled into a few things that maybe she'd rather have been golfing perhaps, but she got pulled into some additional things. So that can happen. So basically, you have your monthly meeting as council, public meeting for council, your committee of the whole meeting, your chair of your committee, and your vice chair has 4 meetings for sure. And just other stuff. So it's not onerous, but as Diane said, you can put as much into it as you want or as little into it as you want, but the more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Great, excellent. Just while you still have the microphone there, what's the thing that you spent more time doing than you expected? Which I thought was a great question, this idea that, you can say the meetings and you can say all this. What is it that actually took up some time that you're like, wow, I didn't really expect that? It may be a good, maybe, whatever. It's a good question. I liked that one.
Yeah, well, for me, and Kevin's sitting at the back of the room here probably laughing at me because Kevin knows exactly the deal, how it works. But basically, I was a councillor before I was the mayor,
Right.
so I knew pretty well what the deal was, right? But the unfortunate part for me sometimes is, I'm not sure if it's a little different as a councillor, I think, but sometimes you come into the building here at 8 o'clock in the morning to sign a few checks or to sign some documents or to meet somebody about something, and before you know it, it's 10:30, and you say, well, I better go to my day job here, so.
Before the day is gone.
That does happen from time to time. That's part of the thing that probably surprised me more as time went on. I said, holy smokes, it's like 2 hours have passed, and so. But I think I pretty well knew what to expect. But that would be the thing that surprised me.
Yep.
Well, I'm not sure I was surprised by the amount of time I had worked with the provincial government. I'd worked with a conservation group. So compared to that, being a part-time councillor was pretty breezy. But the mayor, of course, does put more time in than the councillors do. And it can vary depending on which committee you chair. I found when I was chair of the Planning and Heritage Committee that took more time than being chair of some of the other committees. But again, it's what you want to put into it, and it depends on what's going on in the town at any given point. This town has done a lot of growing, therefore the Planning Committee tends to be a very busy committee.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, that certainly makes sense. So I asked you what the best part of the job was, and maybe kind of the flip side of that, what was the most challenging part of your job? As you got into it, what were the things that, and challenging doesn't mean bad sometimes. It's the thing that stretches you, or, it may have surprised you, or been something that you had to learn and a growth opportunity as well. But the question was, what was something that was the most challenging part of the job?
I think the mayor already alluded to this, where it takes sometimes, especially for a big project, an infrastructure project where you need 2 other levels of government to come in and sign on the dotted line that they're in for a third or whatever amount they're in for in order to put in a sewer or water system or whatever. So waiting on the other partners probably is one of the most challenging things in being a counselor, because all 3 orders of government are involved in those major projects, or should be, otherwise they just don't go. We don't want to increase taxes, so you have to be rather careful as to how you spend your money. And when we'd be sitting around the table in December trying to put the budget together, some decisions had to be made, but often people were very accommodating and figuring out ways to spread things over 2 or 3 years. So money and partnerships, it's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess Diane alluded to the budget. You know, the budget's a big part of, you know, what drives this town, and the budget is constructed by the staff and the council in collaboration. And that's one of the things that we haven't said yet here tonight, is there's a lot of collaboration takes place here at the municipal level. So when you're thinking about running for municipal, it's really a collaborative affair. Council working together, like myself and council, and working with staff, working with residents. But the hardest part, I guess, for me, probably the hardest part for me and any councillor, I pretty well imagine, is that sometimes things come to you that you have to make decisions on, and the decision may not be a popular decision, but it's the best decision for the town. And sometimes you just have to make that decision, and you're not going to be popular, at least for the short term. But you know it's the right decision, and that's the other thing too, is like as a municipal government, there's 7 individuals, 6 councillors that vote on items, and they vote their conscience, and they vote their how they feel about it based on their knowledge. So you don't always get unanimous decisions, but that's important, is that they have a say and that they get to vote how they think they should vote. And but the hardest part, I think, is to make decisions, difficult decisions that may not be the most popular decision.
Oh, I can imagine, for sure. Derek.
You know I was going to ask a question.
I was hoping you would ask a question, Derek.
I got 2 questions.
Well, we'll see.
Okay, first question. You're running for councillor. How old do you have to be? How long do you have to be a resident? And do you have to be a Canadian citizen? And the second question, if somebody got on council, what would you have to do to get a 4th ward and 2 extra councillors on here? Because the size of this town is growing too big, and you spend way too much time on the committees, and you need new committees.
Crazy talk. It's crazy talk.
I'm going to grab a pamphlet to actually answer your first question, Derek. So these are up front. Your question around...
That was the easy question.
That was the easy question. I know, I figured I'd take that one. So there are pamphlets here from Elections PEI. So your first question around how old you have to be, how long you do have to be a Canadian citizen. You have to be a resident of the province for 6 months, I believe, and the date was May.
Province or town?
Sorry. So it says here, reside in the province since May 5th by the preceding period immediately preceding election day, and be ordinarily resident in the municipality on election day. So what I will say is, to clarify them that further, it really would be an Elections PEI question, because they do set all those standards and those types of things. So for those answers, I would definitely direct everyone in that direction. I'm not familiar enough, and maybe my colleagues here at the front are, with how the wards are created, changed, and whatnot, if that's provincial, municipal, do either of you familiar with that?
Sure. To the best of my knowledge.
Well, we have one of our commissioners in the back of the room here for the ward system.
Oh.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
Before I speak to that.
Okay, but to the best of my knowledge, the number of councillors are dictated by the province, by the Municipalities Act. But that was only changed last year, and one change that was made, initially you used to have to be resident in the town for 6 months before you could run for an election. So when I moved to the town in June of 1994, I couldn't run in the election that autumn because I hadn't been here for a full 6 months. I'd moved over from Charlottetown, so I couldn't run in Stratford. So that was one thing I lobbied to get changed when they did the Municipalities Act, even though I've never run again. But by next time, I had been here the full 6 months. But that's a problem when people move around a lot. And now that there are 4-year terms, you know, you had to wait another 4 years to have been here for the 6 months. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, I'll talk about Derek's question about wards, 4 wards, so that's 8 councillors. That would, I'm not sure how that could change, if that could change, if it couldn't change, that it could probably change if we wanted to change it. I personally wouldn't change it. I think 6 councillors for a community of 10,000 is probably sufficient. Summerside has 8, Charlton has 10, some communities, small communities have 4. You know, that's just my personal opinion. Now, whether technically how that could change, I'm not sure, but it probably could at some point in time. But I suspect it's part of the Municipalities Act. That determines the number of councillors, the wards, et cetera, et cetera. That can't be changed, of course. But I think we're going to see, at least for the next election, it's going to be 6 councillors, 3 wards. So,
Yeah, I don't see that changing anytime in the next little bit. Any other questions from the floor or comments? Sure.
I guess based on what you said.
Just so you'll have your question
That's all right.
recorded.
The camera's not on you, they'll just hear you.
It's okay. I got a face for radio. Anyway,
that's why you're supposed
That's
to.
right, that's right.
We got that.
So, anyway, based on what you said, is that you only have to be a resident of Stratford on election day and be a resident of PEI. I'm just clarifying something, right? And a resident of PEI for 6 months, right? Is that correct?
That is what
And then the other question would
pamphlet
be, I
was.
guess, I know this is gonna end up going back to elections PEI, but if you're in Stratford when you're a councillor, get elected, and you happen to move, or some, you know, life happens, right? You happen to move outside of town, can you still remain a councillor of Stratford when you're not residing in Stratford?
Diane's giving me a pretty solid no on that one.
No, we've lost 2 councillors over the years. One moved out of province and the other moved to Charlottetown.
That's great, thank you.
Then you hold a by-election. If it's longer, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Then you have to hold a by-election if there's longer than a 6-month period before the next municipal election.
And then sometimes people get appointed to the Senate, of course.
Right.
And then
You
Just all
lose people
good.
for
You
any
lose
number
people
of
for lots of
reasons.
reasons. That's the only thing that would have taken you away from us, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, for sure. Please.
First, I'd like to say to David, thanks a lot for your help, and the city's help, with some of the work I did. Really appreciate it. It was really good of the town to do that. My question is, I am a shift worker. My work is all over the pond. Evenings, days, nights, right? So, you know, you're required to be at council meetings, and I have no idea whether there are provisions made within elections PEI, or when people run for office and win, that you have work and you get to leave work to go to these council meetings. What's the?
I'm not aware, so
How
we'll look
does-
to find.
How does that work?
You know.
Because if there's nothing for that, then people
Yeah.
who work shift work
So-
can't run.
So what you're asking, Joe, is like if you're a councillor
Right.
and you're got an evening shift or a day shift or a night shift, how do you work that? How do you attend meetings if you're potentially working? So basically, the way it would work is you would have to obviously have an agreement with your employer to either to be available for meetings. The meetings are typically scheduled on specific dates in each month. The other thing that can happen sometimes is if you're a councillor and it fits your schedule better to have the meetings at noon time or 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock, you can usually make that change. But as far as your employer letting you off, that's sort of between you and your employer to work out. So as far as when meetings are during your work hours, or if you can get off, or your lunchtime, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's a little different with provincial politics. I mean, the salary
Yeah.
for provincial politics, somebody
Yeah.
can live on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could leave the job if they wanted to.
Exactly.
You can't really do that with municipal politics.
Exactly.
So it does
Yep.
handcuff some people from
Yeah.
being able to do that.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Sure.
And you may be covering this in a minute, sorry.
No, I'd rather you ask it.
I'm just wondering, for somebody that is thinking maybe of running for council, what are the steps exactly to do that? Like, is there, I know someone said something about, so many signatures, or like, I don't know, you need your signage and you need your stuff, like, who do you talk to put everything in motion?
That's a great question. No, and we were, exactly, right? So how does one get started, really? Like, what's the first thing to do? What are the official steps, and maybe what are some of the tips and tricks along the way? Absolutely. Great. Thank you.
Well, there are a lot of steps, and they don't all have to be in a certain sequence. You can do some things concurrently. One of the big things, first of all, is decide that you are going to offer. And that's the first big decision. And once you're over that hurdle, the rest is easier. One of the things is to decide what ward you're going to run in. There are 3 wards. And sometimes there may be a retiring councillor in a ward, and then there's more interest all of a sudden because there's a vacancy. Another thing is to make your official announcement, usually a media release that'll show up in the Guardian and a few other places. And pick some issues that you personally know quite a bit about or are concerned about, so that you're not just, oh gee, I'm a great person, I've been in Boy Scouts and I've been this or that. No, say like, I'm really concerned about what's going on with our sewage management system in the town. And I would like to be there to do something to improve that. So pick your issues. They don't have to be everything, just pick a few things that you care about. It's good always to read past newsletters and get up to date on the issues. Sit in on some council meetings. They're every second Wednesday of the month. And in the summer, they're at the 4:30.
We have another one on August 8th, and everyone's invited to come.
So there's nothing like actually sitting in on a council meeting and see how one works so that you have some idea. And you have to decide if you're going to do signage or not, put up signs. I didn't, but I was quite well known, and I only needed to come second. Steve had beautiful signs.
And he was coming first.
I don't know if it was because of the signs. He had more to it than that. But the point was, my argument was, well, I don't need to do signs. They're what do I do with them after? I have to clean them up from the environment after. So the other thing to do is get a group of people that might be interested in working with you, looking at your brochure. Do a good brochure that you're going to personally, hopefully, deliver to every house, or get your grandchildren to help you out. I had 2 grandchildren who had good sneakers and could help me out.
Who can resist a kid?
So the ideal thing is to get these delivered to every house in your ward, hopefully seeing as many people if they're home when you knock, but you just can't do it in the evenings. And one thing about it here, our elections are in October. We've got a lot of skunks in Stratford, so be very careful. I usually didn't campaign after dark.
And dogs.
And dogs.
And dogs.
Oh yeah, I got bitten once in my very first election, right in the arm. So after that, I didn't hand the brochure to the landowner if the dog was anywhere near. It was a big dog. So there's a number of steps. It will cost you some money to produce a brochure, and if you're going to do signs, and if you have some friends who are urging you to run, say, I'd like your donation, please. So that is not all on you. There is some money for being a counselor. You're never going to be rich being a counselor in Stratford. But anyway, it's great if some people will help you out financially, especially for those things that you have to put money out on, and start early. Don't wait until nomination day, which is very late in the process. Start early, make your announcement, and get out around the community. When Steve McDonald was a councillor, he got around to the community twice, because he would start early in the summer and say, I'm gonna run for council this autumn. And of course, he was well known to start with, but he went around twice. So that's a big commitment, but it's your own time and meeting people face to face that is very important.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
And just to add to Diane's comment, so first of all, there's no cost to register for Stratford. We intentionally made it free. There's no deposit to run in Stratford. It's not the same in other communities. The other thing too, of course, with the way the world's going, social media is an excellent way to reach people. And
I didn't do that, by the way.
but it is a way to reach people and to get feedback. And as Diane said, it's important to sort of, you have to stand for something, and that's you have some things that you want to accomplish or do, and you'll find when you go door to door that there'll be certain issues will kind of rise to the top, and you say, well, that's an issue I think I can really support or work towards or help. So those things will happen when you go door to door. You don't necessarily have to have all your platform ready at the start, but as you go door to door, and certain issues become very important that you notice in the community. Well, if there's an issue, like say affordable housing, for example, you could say, well, that's an issue I want to focus on, and so that could be part of your campaign. But it's important, as Diane said, to go door to door. Or talk to councillors or former councillors, talk to Diane or myself or anyone about what's involved in running, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about that, or anyone about what's involved in a campaign.
So here's the difference in the generations. I didn't mention social media, you'll notice, because I'm such a techno weenie.
Yeah, she's on Twitter. She's on Twitter.
I don't do the Twitter.
Oh.
Does someone else do it?
It's fake news.
She has a team.
That's great, no, I really appreciate it. And wonderful tips. I mean, obviously there's the official process, which you can look up on elections PEI, but those ideas of having something to stand for, putting together a few good communications pieces, but you're right, online and social media can be a great way to at least start connecting with people and hearing their chatter, hearing what they're talking about and those types of things too. It's a great way to keep a finger on the pulse of those things. Question here?
I don't mean to be redundant, but I'm going to be.
Okay.
Once you move into Stratford, then you can cherry pick your ward. You can run it once you're in the ward, and you can really decide what.
You can run in any ward, I guess is the question.
That's
Sure.
the question. That's what it is.
No, that's a fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always lived in Ward 3. I once represented Ward 1, but for the majority of the time I represented Ward 2.
They're just across the road from Ward.
Yeah.
It's kind of a street divided to us.
That's a fair question, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the floor? Got a few more kicking here, so. Dawn. Maybe you can tell us where you're from now.
Hi everyone, my name is Dawn Wilson. I work with the PEI Coalition for Women in Government. We've had a really wonderful partnership with the town of Stratford over the years, and certainly, Mayor Duncan has mentioned Stratford's known for its equity and inclusion and focus on diversity, and certainly I know you make great efforts with that within your committees as well, having women and underrepresented voices heard in those decision-making tables as well. I'd love to hear a little bit more just on those tips, those concrete tips, because we often have those requests from women who are considering running. And specifically about budget. So how much does it cost to run? Is fundraising necessary within running for municipal council in Stratford? I think those are really helpful information for people who are trying to make that decision to run. And then secondly, I'd love to hear a little bit more from both of you about efforts that you've made, because I know that you have from speaking with other people around encouraging women in underrepresented groups to seek these leadership positions.
So yeah, maybe just a little bit. I mean, you don't have to give us your detailed budget of your campaigns, but from your experience talking to other counselors, knowing even that range, because it can be pretty daunting to think this is what a coder should take and those types of things.
My biggest cost was my brochure, because I didn't do street signs. And the brochure, again, you can do as cheap as a one-page black and white, but I wouldn't do that. I would suggest, having a nice little fold-over brochure. Don't put too much information into it. Keep it point form and have some pictures, because if it looks too busy and cluttered, it'll get set aside to be read later. Never. Yeah, never to be read later. So keep it as simple as possible. Some people might do a second drop of another brochure, but I would recommend not doing that. Put a lot of energy into your first brochure, get other people to look at it. For Pete's sakes, don't misspell anything. All these things make an impression. So the biggest cost for me was the brochure, and then the second thing would be if you were doing signs, that would be more expensive. And if you were hiring somebody else to do your social media. So the ideal thing is to get a volunteer to do the social media if you can, or do it yourself if you're able. And the biggest thing is your own time in going around and meeting all the people in your ward. And as I say, don't leave it until autumn. Start in the summer.
Okay, so we're going to answer the first question about cost. So I'll tell you my story. So as a counselor, I did signs when I ran for counselor in 2003. That would be my biggest cost, and of course a brochure, which I think I may have printed myself actually. And then when I ran for mayor, kind of a funny story. I ran against Kevin in 2006, and I got signs done, of course, with my picture on it, and so then, of course, I lost the election, but I kept the signs.
Don't put a year on your signs.
I kept the signs. Don't put a year on the signs. Exactly. Don't put 20. And then, of course, I ran again in 2010, and I used the same signs. And it's kind of funny because at the time, Brendan Elliott from CBC interviewed me at the Providence Donuts, and he asked me about my cost. I said, well, that picture of me is from like 2003. First of all. And it was actually a 2003 picture. It was my 2003 picture when I ran for council. It wasn't on my signs back then. But my signs were done in 2006. I used them in 2010, and I was claiming in 2014, so there was zero cost. So the cost, I would say the cost is not a big factor, Don. I think when it cost, if someone asks you what the cost, I think what the better conversation, you can certainly address the question, but I think the best answer you can give when it comes to cost is that the cost is not that much. $500, I'm not sure what the cost, let's say it's $500. But I think what you have to get across to people is, and if you're dealing with women, and we'll talk about encouraging women to work here in a second, but just tell them that municipal government, if they're talking Stratford, certainly other communities are the same, I'm sure. It's a very collaborative process. Any councillor that we have here, Councillors Jackson and Ogden, and former Councillor Griffin and Mayor Jenkins will tell you. And those that sit in our committees, they'll tell you. It's a very collaborative government over here in Stratford and throughout the island. And so I think when people think about running a municipal government, they think about the provincial and federal government elections and campaigns, and it's not like that at all. It's individuals, and after you're elected, that's the best part, I think, is after you get elected, everyone working together as a team in a collaborative manner. I certainly hope that from a male-female perspective that we're doing things in a way that encourages their participation. I'll let Diane speak to that, but if I'm a female considering running and they're asking you that question, just say, basically, I think you can tell them that it's a very collaborative process. They'll enjoy it. They all have talents. I mean, everyone in this room has a talent that they bring to the table, and as a council, what I try to do as mayor is I try to match the talents with the roles that they play, and everyone's got a role to play, and everyone has a talent. So I think in terms of encouraging more women to run, I I think we have to talk to them one-on-one and encourage them to run, because a lot of people don't have the confidence, male or female. And sometimes they don't realize that they have that ability and that talent, and sometimes they have to be asked and discussed and encouraged. So I think the best thing you can do is encourage them, number one. And I've done that myself over the years. And sad to say, we've only got one female counselor right now, but we've got a senator. So which is great. So we're doing okay. But we do want, I would say that we do want more women run on council. We try to have gender balance on our committees, and that's a great training ground for council, as the senator mentioned earlier. But I think if we have a diverse council from a gender perspective and from other perspectives as well, it leads to better decision making, because you're looking at it through a different lens. And so we want, in the town here, we do want a gender balance as much as possible on council, but we have to get people to run. If you get them to run, they've got a very good chance of winning, and that's the challenge. So I would just say encourage women that ask, or that you know would be good counselors to run. I know Senator's got some good points on gender balance and all that sort of stuff, because we've talked about it in the past.
Yeah, we're disappointed that we, first of all, we're not getting more women candidates. So you can't get a whole lot elected if you don't have a whole lot of them running, because there's only 6 positions on the council and the mayor's job. I think the problem is people think it's going to take more time, and they may feel they don't have the necessary background. That comes back to, as the mayor said, the lack of confidence. Both male and female fall into that category. But I find young women are just so busy, you know, especially if they have children. They are so busy. So that is a hurdle they have to overcome. And a lot will depend on whether they've got sufficient help in their household, if they have children, so that they can be active on council, as well as having perhaps a paid job outside of home and all the other volunteer activities they're involved in their community. So it may be a case that you do have to drop some other volunteer activity. Choose your priorities. It's like anything else in life that you have to do. But one point I want to make, it's not nearly as expensive to run for council in Stratford as it is in Charlottetown. Go around Charlottetown to see all the signs. That's a lot of money. Thank you.
And I'll just add one point,
Please. Yeah.
I just want to add one point to Dawn's question, and it's so important. And like, everyone has to make the decision themselves whether they want to run or not. And it's important, as Senator said, it's important to have support at home, because it takes, like my wife, of course, there's things that we sacrifice as an elected official, and my wife or your spouse or spouses have to make up the difference. And Diane said that support, I'm sure, as well. But I think that if a woman wants to run for council, you know, she has to have a discussion with her spouse or significant other or whoever in her household. If she's a young mother, for example, it is her. They're busy soccer, and you know, I went through when I was young, a young father, and I stepped away from council. But I think it's important. The same as a man can run, but a woman can get the same support from the man as the man can from the woman, right? So I think it's important to have that conversation as a couple or as a family, whatever. And the spouse plays, significant others play such an important role in supporting at home, pulling up the slack, if you will, because there are times when we're not there, and the other spouse has to make up the difference, right? So it's important to have support at home.
Any questions or comments from the floor?
I do a couple others.
So, one of the questions I thought was great here, and I don't think we've touched on it, is what do you wish you knew before becoming a counselor? What do you wish someone had told you? Whether it's about running, whether it's about, serving in office. David looks like he's right away.
I don't know what the mayor answered that one. It's so long ago since I first ran for council, I'm not sure I can remember. Anyway, what a cop-out, eh?
Well, so the question is, what do you, what was the
What
question?
do you
again?
wish you knew before
Oh, yeah.
running? What do you wish someone had told you?
Well, 8 years ago, I swear to God, if I'd known how much I'd be talking about sewage lagoons and wastewater treatment plants, I know more about wastewater treatment plants than anybody in this room, I think. Maybe Kevin might know something or back in the room there, but, you know, I know more about wastewater than, just ask me about corn and wastewater and I'll tell you a story. Anyways, but that's not a regret. But it's,
No, it's just something.
I wish I had known that I'd be spending that much time. I never would have imagined before. But that's how things work out. And so that's the nature of municipal politics, whether in Charlottetown or whether it's Stratford or Cornwall or any other community. Certain issues pop up in that community and you have to deal with them as they come along. And they're not easy sometimes, they're not pretty sometimes, and you just have to deal with them and hope that there's some money to deal with them.
Are you saying the blue frogs at the sewage lagoon are not pretty?
No, very true. And I guess that's probably what challenges you in that position. You may come in with your 2 or 3 topics and certainly can work towards those, but quite often it's what creeps up in you in that community that's important that you end up having to deal with.
Yeah, no question. Okay, let's talk about the future. Election night comes, you're elected. What happens? What are you supposed to do? I mean, as a councillor or a mayor, you go in, and is there anybody here to help you out?
That's a great question.
What are you supposed to do? Or, you know, as a mayor, I take it you sit down and you say, okay, Councillor so-and-so is going to be on this committee.
Yeah.
How's that all work?
Sure.
Yeah. So, you know, post-election day, I'm
Okay.
now a councillor, what happens to me?
Okay. So the first thing, so the way the system works here in Stratford is you have 6 councillors that win and a mayor. And the mayor chooses who sits, who chairs, and who chairs and who's the co-chair, not the co-chair, sorry, the vice chair of each committee. And that's the role the mayor plays. In terms of support, if you're elected as a councillor, in terms of support, we have staff here, CAO, Robert Hughes in this case. There's called a binder, or there's a package that they go in and review with you, sort of bring you up to speed. And I guess actually, Jody could probably speak more to this because he's the most recent councillor elected. But basically, Robert will review with you, or all the councillors, sort of the structure of the town, the government, the governance, and the issues that we're dealing with, sort of the pertinent issues that we're dealing with of the day. And then basically from there, you kind of, there's no book from there. It's just kind of you have, the structure is we got committees, 7 standing committees plus HR, I guess 7 plus HR, of which there's a councillor, myself as chair, and a councillor or myself as vice chair, and then 4 or 5 is. And those committees they have their job to do, and then they report to council. So they pass the information up to council, and we take that information and we make decisions based on that recommendation or other factors at the end of the day. And that's basically it. But there is support. I mean, but there's no book written, unfortunately. Once you start along the right, things just kind of develop how they develop. You know. I have probably a different management style than Kevin did, I don't know, but maybe they're the same, but everyone's unique and different, so, and each councillor is unique and different, so they have their own way of running their committee. They're in charge of the committee, and staff, of course, staff play a huge role. As Diane said, we have great staff here, and staff help a lot, so that's basically it.
One more thing that I found really important in terms of orientation is the ideal is to have a council in which you have some councillors who are veterans, who have had at least 1 election under their belt, have served 1 or 2 terms on council. So you get that continuity or memory. corporate memory. Then the other thing that's important is to keep getting new blood. You don't want the same 6 people year after term after election. So we need a nice mix, not only of gender and age, and by the way, quite a few of us who were on council were retired. Not that there's anything wrong with that, still full of energy. However, we have our own issues to live with in the community and in our lives, but younger people have different issues. So they should be represented on council too. So, just don't leave it to all the old codgers like myself. Get in there.
And I will note, and it was something I was going to mention in our closing remarks, that Robert Hughes, who David mentioned, is the Chief Administrative Officer here in the town. And he has very openly and wanted us to say tonight that if there is anyone who has more questions about the town and things that are happening, to contact him directly. He's more than happy to sit down with anyone interested in running for council. If you can't contact Robert, Wendy Watts is the communications and community engagement, so she'll make you in touch with them. So they weren't able to be here this evening, but definitely want to provide that pre-orientation potentially and answer some of those more detailed questions. Great. Any other questions on the floor? Kevin. This will be a tough one, I hope.
Not a question, just a comment. Based on 13 years on various councils over the last 32 years, based on those 13 years, if you do run for council, there's a 99 and 44 100% chance that you look back and say that it was a great experience. It was a great professional experience. It was a great personal experience. There are some opportunity costs, as David and Diana both mentioned. You will miss some time with some family. You will miss some time with some children. But the benefits are really, really worthwhile, and I'd really encourage anybody to step forward, no matter what your status in life, young, old, married, single, children, no children. You will look back and say it was a really worthwhile experience. You meet a lot of good people in government. I know politicians take a bad rap, sometimes municipal, federal, provincial, but there are a lot of good people in government that you will meet and collaborate with, and a lot of good staff as well. And your interactions with residents, you'll look back at the package and say, I'm really, really glad I did that.
That's great. Thank you. Very much. Well, I have one last question. We're kind of hitting 7:30 here. So to David and Diane both, what would your one piece of advice be, and your pitch to convince someone to run if they're sitting on the fence?
Oh, my one piece of advice would be don't procrastinate. Say, oh, we'll do it next election, or the next election, or when I retire, or when I'm rich, or some other reason. Don't procrastinate. Get to it. As I mentioned earlier, we also have to watch the age balance on council, and everybody gets a year older each year, and if they've been on council for a long time, then we really do need some new blood.
In terms of, the first one was...
Piece of advice.
Piece of advice, okay, so I'll echo what Diane said, don't leave it to the last minute. I would say, come in with an open mind, especially if you're elected. I mean, once you're elected, that's one of the big things I think as a councillor you should have, as a mayor, we should have an open mind, because sometimes you come in with a particular notion of how it should be, but the process of government in Stratford and all municipalities across the PA, I'm sure, is the same, is we discuss it as a group, and people have different viewpoints, and it's important, you have to respect everyone's viewpoint. We don't always agree, that's for sure, but at the end of the day, with the discussion, you're going to come out with a really good decision if you have an open mind. Sometimes people can change their mind, and it works all kinds of different ways. That would be my biggest piece of advice. And the other thing would be, in terms of encouraging people to run, I can't stress enough that everybody in this room, I can honestly say everybody in this room has the ability to be a counselor. And there's so many more people, and as Diane said, there's good people in this community that do all kinds of things in the community. And maybe it's not for them, and it's not for everyone. But I think that if you really want to run for council, think about it seriously, consider it. And if you have challenges at home or at work, we do try to work with that and make accommodations where possible. We try as much as possible. It's not always possible. We do try to accommodate, and there's times that you can't be at everything. But I think there's just people in general, I'll say the note here is that there's many people with many abilities, talents that they can bring to their municipal government, and if they really want to make a difference in their community, and they can, then they should consider running municipally. And as Kevin said, you won't regret it. It's you'll get more, you get as much out of it as you put into it, and you get to help shape your community. And I just think that anyone that's considering should, and that's considering should talk to somebody, get advice, and talk to anyone that's previously been a councillor. And if you really want to run, I think you should. It's not a cost issue, and if you have a passion for your community and you want to do it, I think you should do it.
I don't really want to say anything after all of that, but say thank you to our two panelists here this evening, and all of you for coming out, and those who watched online. As I said, Elections PEI is a great resource, both for the facts and information and other pieces you're looking for. If you are interested in seeing what a town council meeting looks like, if you haven't seen one yet, the next one is Wednesday, August 8th at 4:30, and it is a great opportunity to kind of see how the council works. And I've had the pleasure of sitting in and being involved with that, and it really is a collaborative group that is working together to try and make the town of Stratford the very best place it can be. And I would encourage anyone to get involved in there, and please reach out to the town, to the staff, and to others if you have questions, and reach out to other people you know, right? Maybe it's not for you if you've decided that, but encouraging others to run and get involved can be that little push maybe someone needed who was thinking about it, to say, look, I'll help you with this, and I think you'd be a great candidate. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time this evening, and we'll close it off there.
Thank you.
Hi, John, how are you?